Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Michael Lofton Show on Reason and Theology. We're going to talk about a lot of things today. We're going to address some objections that various Protestants have about the Virgin Mary. So, we're going to take a look at that. We're also going to examine a Catholic and Muslim Marian procession. Did you even know that there was such a thing? Catholics and Muslims participating in a procession of the Virgin Mary. We're going to take a look at that. We're also going to talk about massive amount of idolatry in Islam. And then, of course, we are going to examine a case where there's a curious video of a person floating around out there on social media right now who presented himself to Holy Communion, and right before he received the Eucharist, just falls out. And yeah, it's a little concerning what happened. So we're going to take a look at that and consider whether or not that is an instance of demonic possession. So all that coming up next. All right, so I came across something on Twitter not long ago, actually, maybe about an hour or so ago, where I saw some Protestants who posted a number of objections against the Catholic understanding of the Virgin Mary. And they say these are facts about the Virgin Mary that don't coincide with, or go against, rather, the Catholic understanding of the Virgin Mary. I want us to explore them together. Okay, so you ready for this, right? So here's the first one. The Virgin Mary had kids after she had Jesus. We've heard this once or twice, right? It's interesting. This is actually a very old heresy that goes back to roughly the 5th century. I recall reading St. Jerome's treatise against Helvetius, I believe is who it was, who proposed that the Virgin Mary had other children besides Jesus, and Jerome just roasted him. He destroyed him so severely that he pretty much put that view to rest, and it was only brought back by Protestants, and not even the ones that you would expect, not even Martin Luther or John Calvin, for instance, but rather Protestants after that. There is no biblical support for the view that the Virgin Mary had other children. Now, people are going to say, but wait, doesn't it talk about the brothers and sisters of Jesus? Doesn't the New Testament talk about that? Well, it's interesting because the term that is used in Koine Greek is not necessarily brothers or sisters. It's rather could be a kin, a relative, a cousin. And in fact, that's one of the earliest interpretations of these passages, is that these are either cousins or children of Joseph from a prior marriage. That is the traditional exegesis. So there's nothing that would demand in the original Greek the position that the Virgin Mary had other children aside from Jesus. And also, I will point out, some people will say, but wait, doesn't it also say that Joseph did not know her until after Jesus, until Jesus was born? Doesn't that somehow suggest that Joseph had intimate knowledge of her, that he had sexual relations with her? Actually, no, because again, going back to the Greek here, the term for until doesn't necessarily mean that the action happened afterwards. So, for example, the same word is also used elsewhere in the New Testament to say that Jesus will have his feet over his enemies until he reigns over them, something along those lines, that he will reign over them until. But of course, it doesn't necessarily mean that Jesus is going to somehow no longer reign over his enemies. That's not implied by the term. It could just mean that certainly up until that point, this action occurred, but it doesn't say anything about what happens afterwards. And so the passage that people often point to in the book of Matthew that says that Joseph did not know her until doesn't also suggest that somehow he knew her afterwards. And so that's another really bad argument. In fact, it was John Calvin who refuted that argument and said, look, there's nothing in the New Testament that says that she had other children, or that she did not actually remain perpetually a virgin, which is why he and Martin Luther believed in the perpetual virginity of the Virgin Mary. So, okay, moving on to the next one, he says she was a sinner. Well, there's nothing in the New Testament that says she was a sinner. And some people will say, well, what about Romans? Doesn't it say that all have fallen short of the glory of God? Yes, but you make an exception for Jesus, don't you? Right. Okay, so why can't you make an exception for the Virgin Mary? If you read exceptions already into Romans, what is the problem with reading another exception here? And then doesn't she say that Jesus, or that God is her savior? Doesn't she say this in the Magnificat? Yes, she does. That doesn't necessarily mean that she has committed sins, because it could be that God has saved her from committing any sins. And so, again, the term savior there doesn't necessitate that she has committed sins. Even a person who has not committed a sin would need a savior in order to be in that position that they don't commit a sin. They still need God's grace. They still need the work of redemption, which the Virgin Mary did. So she still needed the atonement. She still needed all of those things in order to be immaculately conceived. It says Jesus died for her sins. Well, certainly Jesus died for her, but he nowhere established that she committed any sins. So he's just assuming all of this stuff, that she had other children, that she committed other sins, but he's not actually proving it. He says she cannot hear or answer the prayers of anyone. Who says, where does the New Testament say that she can't? It doesn't. So again, he's assuming a position, but he hasn't actually demonstrated it. And in fact, in the book of Revelation, chapter 8, you do have this notion where an angel presents the prayers of the saints to God. It's interesting that an angel has that intercessory role. Now, obviously, we can go directly to God in prayer, of course. But in the same way that you ask your friends to pray for you, you can also ask your heavenly friends to pray for you, whether they are angels in heaven, as we see in the book of Revelation, or the Virgin Mary, the very one who gave birth to Jesus. So again, not only is there not anything in the New Testament that would contradict it, in fact, it would seem that it's implied there in the book of Revelation, chapter 8. Then it says, the church is not commanded to honor her or venerate her whatsoever. Are you limited to just mere commands? Like, do you only do things whenever you're commanded to do them? Or do you sometimes do things out of love? Now, the Virgin Mary herself said, all generations will call me blessed. So why don't we do that? Oh, okay. Then it says, those who venerate Mary are practicing a form of goddess worship and practicing paganism. Of course not, because Catholics don't believe that the Virgin Mary is a goddess. She's a creature. And yes, she was in need of redemption. Even though she's immaculately conceived, the work of redemption still applied to her and brought her to that position, to where she could be born in that position. And then we're practicing paganism. Yeah, no, we're not doing that. We believe there's only one God. So, this is just typical Protestant nonsense, and honestly, it's disappointing. I really think that Protestants need to step it up. They really need to step it up with their criticisms against Catholicism. And another thing is, why do Protestants have this obsession with denigrating the Virgin Mary? It's really weird. It's like you do believe the Virgin Mary is the mother of Jesus, right? You do believe that, right? Then why are you so obsessed with trying to put her down and insult her? And why do you guys continue to repeat the same tired, bad arguments over and over and over. Can y'all just do an update at some point? Can you update your arguments? Offer something different, something new, something effective? Because this isn't working. Well, let's move on to the next point here. So, Catholics and Muslims um, sharing in a Marian procession. I came across this earlier today and I thought, oh, that's interesting. I don't recall seeing this before. And I'm a little curious how some Muslims would react to this because evidently in Tunisia, you have a group of Catholics, it's a minority there, but you have a group of Catholics engaging in a procession of the Virgin Mary. And then you have Muslims joining in with them. And now, okay, I understand that Muslims venerate the Virgin Mary. I understand that. I get that. But I guess I wouldn't expect them to do it in this kind of way because I thought they were very much iconoclasts. But here they are engaging in a procession with the statue of the Virgin Mary. And again, no, this is not something that Catholics worship, but we do recognize that the images that you have, whether it's an icon or a statue, point you into the direction of the prototype of the thing itself. And so we don't worship wood and we don't venerate wood, but we can kind of use it as a tool to direct or center our veneration to the prototype itself, the person itself. So if it's worship, that's to God alone. If it is veneration, that could be to the Virgin Mary or the saints. But you can use icons and statues in the process. So it's not idolatry. There is a pretty big distinction here, but I'm pretty certain that Muslims are staunchly iconoclasts. So I don't know how this works, but let me share my screen and show you what I'm talking about here. Let me see. Okay. Should be able to see it right around now. Okay, let's take a look at this together. Marian procession in Tunisia brings Catholics and Muslims together. Okay. So this was just posted today. Every year in the heart of North Africa, the country of Tunisia offers a unique spectacle, an annual procession honoring the Virgin Mary, known locally as the Corja el Madonna, the procession of Our Lady, which testifies to religious tolerance. Let me move this little thing out of the way. Hold on. Okay. Which testifies to religious tolerance and coexistence in a region where Christians often go unnoticed due to their small numbers and limited public presence. Okay. Despite the rise of extremist Islamic movements in the early 2010s, the centuries old tradition, so this has been taking place for a while, evidently, persists every August in the streets of Tunisia in a rare display for North Africa. Hundreds of Christians walk unimpeded through the La Goulette north of Tunis, carrying a flower adorned statue of the Virgin Mary to celebrate the Feast of the Assumption on August 15th. And it notes here Muslim participation. Muslim participation amplifies the procession's significance. Now, hold on, wait. Muslims are participating in a procession with a statue of the Virgin Mary. I mean, I'm not, I'm, obviously, I'm in support of processions and statues of the Virgin Mary. I'm a Catholic. So obviously, I accept the Seventh Ecumenical Council. I'm in favor of all that. I'm just trying to figure out how that works with Islam. It just seems to me like there might be a conflict here. I don't know how that works with their position on images. So, I mean, when was the last time you saw, again, Muslims honor the Virgin Mary, hold her in high regard, but when was the last time you saw a Muslim with a statue of the Virgin Mary? It's just not something that I'm used to seeing. So it's throwing me off here. Okay. Maybe somebody could shed some light on this. I don't know what's going on. But oddly enough, I did come across something just earlier. I was going through some lectures of Yasser Qadi, trying to get his perspective on a number of things because I want to hear what some of the greatest Muslim intellects have to say in defense of some really embarrassing things in Islam. For example, Muhammad in the Satanic verses, you know, Muhammad and the story of him giving a head nod, giving the green light to idolatry in Mecca. I covered that not long ago in a video. You're welcome to go and watch it. I'll put a link to it in the show notes. Well, I wanted to hear how he tackles it. I listened to it a while back, but I wanted to hear it again. And then I also checked out one of his lectures on the situation with Zainab, where Muhammad married his son-in-law's ex-wife. It's a really, adopted son's ex-wife. It's a really curious situation that really raises some concerns about Muhammad. Perhaps I'll do a video on that here in the future. But I was going through that. And anyways, he had a curious comment here about massive amounts of idolatry in Islam. And I thought, well, that's interesting, especially in light of the fact that I just saw that article about Muslims participating in this procession. Now, I don't believe that's idolatry, but some Muslims will see that as idolatry. And I kind of wonder if he has this in mind. So let's actually take a look together at what he said. So I'm going to share the screen again and maximize it. And let's go ahead and listen in together. Somebody said there's no sound. Okay, let me try that one more time. Hold on. Hold up. Let's try it one more time. I'm going to actually rewind it just a little bit more so you can get the context.
And you will find people have built a mausoleum or a structure or a pagan temple, and you look and you see there's a rock with red painting or yellow painting on it. Just a rock. And you find people putting meat in front of the rock and putting butter and putting, sweets in front of the rock. And it's mind-boggling that to this day, people can act like this, that they're going to give their acts of worship, they're going to prostrate, they're going to lower their heads to a wood or a rock or a stone. And when you read this, you wonder, subhanAllah, but then you see it with your own two eyes and you see, no, this is still here. And then we talk about those who do this in our own religion, in our own culture. There are some Muslims who do the same with graves, with saints, with mausoleums. The same thing. You see it in many Muslim countries.
Listen to that, with saints, because there is a veneration of saints among some Muslims. I came across this whenever I found out that it's actually Muslims who currently have the head of John the Baptist, I believe. They have a whole shrine for him where both they and Christians go to venerate John the Baptist. All right, so let's watch that again.
There are some Muslims who do the same with graves, with saints, with mausoleums. The same thing. You see it in many Muslim countries. You go and you find Muslims literally bowing their head down in front of the grave of a saint, of a wali, of a pir, doing tawaf around the grave. And you wonder, where is La ilaha illallah? This is exactly what the Jahili...
What he said in Arabic there is, you wonder, where is the profession, there is no God but Allah. So in other words, he's accusing massive amounts of Muslims of idolatry.
There are some Muslims who do the same with graves, with saints, with mausoleums. The same thing. You see it in many Muslim countries. You go and you find Muslims literally bowing their head down in front of the grave of a saint, of a wali, of a pir, doing tawaf around the grave. And you wonder, where is La ilaha illallah? This is exactly what the Jahili Arabs did.
And there he's referring to Arabs prior to revelations that were allegedly given to Muhammad from the angel Gabriel. And so I thought that's interesting. Wow. So, first of all, I do appreciate and respect the fact that he's willing to call out what he perceives to be idolatry in Islam. Okay, I respect the fact that he's willing to do that. But this is interesting because I've never heard a Muslim be so candid like this and speak about what they believe to be a pervasive amount of idolatry taking place in Islam. And I kind of wonder if he thinks that maybe this other situation and many others like that, perhaps, the one where we saw the veneration of the Virgin Mary, I wonder if he thinks that that is idolatry and he kind of has that in mind, or maybe he has something else in mind. He mentioned their veneration of saints and graves and stuff like that. So it sounds like he has a number of things in mind, but that's a curious thing. By the way, I have to say, in reviewing his lectures there on the Sirah, or the life of Muhammad, and especially those two instances, the satanic verses and the issue of Zainab, I don't think he sufficiently relieved my concerns about these events in the life of Muhammad. To be very frank here, to be very blunt, it seems to me like these are very clear examples that show Muhammad was not a moral man, and Muhammad was a false prophet. And look, he's one of their greatest intellects, but I just don't think that he sufficiently relieved the concerns that I had, or probably most non-Muslims would have when they examine the situation, which he's very frank about. And he does admit these are some of the most difficult issues about the life of Muhammad. So if you're a Catholic and you're wanting to engage Muslims, this would maybe be a really good place to start addressing these two situations in the life of Muhammad. I did the satanic verses already in another video, but I'll do this other one about this situation where he married Zainab and the concerns surrounding that situation. Okay, so let's move on to the next point here, and let's go over this video that is floating around right now on social media about a person who may be possessed. We'll see what's going on. I do want to remind y'all first, though, before we do that, hit the like button and hit the subscribe button. I was checking out the stats just earlier today. 66% of the viewers are not subscribed. Come on, y'all. Hit that subscribe button. So y'all are watching the channel. Y'all are enjoying it, hopefully, especially if y'all are coming back. But you haven't hit that subscribe button yet. Go ahead and do that for me. Because that will certainly help me out in what I'm doing here with the channel so that the algorithm can do what it does. So go ahead and do that now. All right. Now, let's talk about this video that's floating around. I'm going to pull it up here and show it to y'all. We're going to watch it together. It's about 30 seconds. We'll watch it several times. So this is taking place at a mass. I'm going to just play through it once without saying anything about it. And then I'm going to give some commentary. So like I said, it's only 30 seconds long. Let me share my screen and let's go through it together. Okay. So here it is. let me stop. Okay. So I see a couple things going on. A lot of people haven't picked up on this yet. Some people are like, well, if this is, demonic possession, why isn't the priest doing an exorcism? And some will point out that priests, have to be given the faculty to do an exorcism by their bishop. If they don't have that faculty, they can only do what's called a minor exorcism. And that's true. They could not do a major exorcism, they could do a minor one. However, I think a lot of people are missing the fact that that's a pallium right there. You see what he's wearing? That's a pallium. You know who wears palliums? Metropolitans and archbishops. That's an archbishop. That not only is a bishop, that's an archbishop. He could perform an exorcism if he wanted to. So a couple things. There's that. Number two, some are saying, well, maybe he's having, a seizure. This is epilepsy. Possibly. But here's some weird things. First of all, it happens exactly when he goes up to receive the Eucharist. The timing is just really weird there, right? The timing. And then number two, the howling like a dog. I don't know if that's consistent with epilepsy. So the timing and the howling, that's what makes me question some things. I see D Bear is asking, why is this being recorded? Well, usually liturgies are recorded, so that's pretty common. But whether or not this is a mental illness, this is some kind of situation that can be explained naturally, or whether or not this is preternatural in origin, I have some questions, and again, it relates to timing and the howling. Watch this again. Here he is. He's going up to receive the Eucharist. Everything is normal. Right now, all of a sudden, when he goes to receive the Eucharist, that's whenever this happens. Very clearly howling like a dog. I don't know if that's consistent with epilepsy. I'll also say, I do find it interesting that they're not doing anything. If this is demonic, why wouldn't you do some minor exorcism, maybe? At the very least? I don't know. Of course, whenever you do an exorcism, the person has to be a willing participant. But if they're going to receive the Eucharist, I'm pretty sure they're willing, right? I'm pretty sure they don't want a demon. And so at that point, I don't see an issue. And it doesn't have to be a minor exorcism. Could be a major exorcism because it's clearly an archbishop. He's wearing a pallium. So I don't know why everybody just pretends like everything's cool. This guy goes and gives the Eucharist to other people. And so does this one, the archbishop over here. Just continues like everything is normal. Now, let's just say for a moment this wasn't demonic, right? And there's just some natural explanation. Well, either way this shakes down, whether it's demonic or natural. Is this the reaction that you would expect? To just kind of do nothing and just watch them? I suppose it is a fair question. I mean, what could they do if this is just kind of a natural thing? Okay, but you would want to show maybe a little bit more concern. I don't know. But if this is spiritual in nature, you would want to do something. You would want to help this person by praying one way or another. I don't know. Jury's out for me, but it does seem like this could potentially be more than just something of a natural origin. Clint says, really think we need to go about our business and not speculate on this. Why? I think that is actually something that is productive for us to discuss, because Look, there is a reality of the demonic out there. Whether or not this was the demonic, okay, jury's out. Can't say with any certainty. But that is a reality, and we need to be aware of it, and we need to know how to respond to it. And the best way is, if you are dealing with something like that, or you know somebody who is, get them to a Catholic priest. And so I do think that this is a productive conversation, but it's also productive because we do need to not be too quick to jump to conclusions and assume that it's demonic, because a lot of times things have just a natural explanation. There's some kind of mental illness at play. So usually what priests will do to kind of discern what is what, whether or not this is mental or not, is they'll of course send them to a mental health physician. If they don't have an explanation, they can perform some tests. So they can maybe have the Eucharist in their pocket. And if there's an aversion um, to the priest, and all of a sudden the person who's allegedly possessed knows that the person has the Eucharist, or knows that they have something, some kind of item in their pocket that they couldn't possibly know if they have hidden knowledge. Okay, you're probably dealing with a demon, right? Because that's not something that you could explain naturally. Or if they have knowledge of, languages that they could never have studied, Aramaic or something like that. It's pretty rare that somebody knows Aramaic these days. Or they have just supernatural strength. Those are some signs that this is demonic in nature, and then you would go forward with an exorcism. So I don't know. It seems to me like this really caught them off guard, and they didn't know what to do. But I would just think, I don't know, do something. Don't just stand there and just act like everything's normal. This isn't normal. Somebody saying the howling sound was added later. I don't know. I don't know if that's true. They're saying, well, a man had a seizure in line of communion, and someone added the howling. I don't know if that's true or not, but let's just pretend for a moment that that's true. Okay. It's still conspicuous that this happened exactly at the moment he goes to receive the Eucharist. That's just an odd thing, right? I guess, obviously it's possible somebody could have a seizure at that moment, but the timing does make it very suspicious. And of course, that would be something you would expect if this is a person who's possessed, because the person might want to receive the Eucharist, but obviously the demon doesn't want them to receive it, because it is the body, blood, soul, and divinity of Jesus. And that is the medicine of immortality, as Ignatius of Antioch in the 2nd century puts it. So they're obviously not going to want a person to receive the Eucharist. So I don't know. Like I said, jury's out for me, but I don't know. But if y'all can find out for sure that the audio was added later, let me know. I'd be happy to take a look at it. But I don't know if that's true. I don't know if that's true. Some people say, oh, it sounds like it's on a loop. I don't know. It didn't sound like it was on a loop to me, but maybe it is. Right? Jury's out for me on that one. But let me talk about one other thing here, since we're talking about demons. I came across this earlier today. I see this pretty often. Let me pull it up on my phone. Here's what somebody said. Okay. Let's see. I'm having to go through a number of posts. Here it is. Pray in Latin. Demons hate Latin. Now, look, I love Latin, okay? I love Latin. I think it's an awesome language for a number of reasons. And I think it's a very beautiful language. And I don't have an issue with anyone praying in Latin, as long as they understand what they're praying. If you're praying something you don't understand, there's an issue there. So don't pray in Latin just because it's Latin. If you understand what you're praying and somehow that's meaningful for you, go for it. But don't do it just because it's Latin. And then number 2, demons hate Latin. I'm sorry, this is just a really ridiculous claim that I've been seeing a lot of people floating around out there that is simply not true. I interviewed Father Carlos Martins, who is an exorcist, well-known exorcist. Asked him this very question. He says, look, there's nothing to this. Latin is no more effective in an exorcism. They don't hate it any more than any other language. That's just simply not true. But some people are of the position that somehow this is inherently a sacred language because it's one of the languages on the cross. Again, not a theological notion that is supported ever by the magisterium. And it's also contradicted by the fact that demons during demonic possessions use Latin all the time. So if they hated it, they wouldn't be using it. And it's not inherently some kind of sacred language. Every prostitute in Rome, as they say, spoke Latin. And you would also have to then say, well, if somehow this language being on the cross somehow makes it a sacred language, you would have to say that about Greek and also Hebrew, because those were also on the cross. But you usually don't see people say that whenever they make this claim about Latin. Usually they're Latin supremacists. So this stuff is pretty wild. And again, I'll just appeal to not only common sense, but I'll also appeal to renowned exorcists who debunk other exorcists out there who make these claims. These are often, by the way, some of those exorcists who make these ridiculous claims. These are usually the ones who also consult demons for theological purposes. I kid you not. I kid you not. And that is something that is condemned. In fact, I even asked Father Carlos about it in the interview, and he was very clear that this is prohibited. You can't consult demons during an exorcism for answers to theological questions. You know, some of these exorcists out there during an exorcism will ask them questions about Lefebvre. They'll ask them questions about, you know, were you the demon who wrote the Quran? And you cannot ask them questions like that because you're seeking information from a demon. And number one, they're liars. And number two, you should not be seeking for information like that from a demon. The only information an exorcist is allowed to ask of a demon is information that is useful in delivering that the demoniac from the demon, and that is it. And somebody says, are you saying demons might lie to us? Believe it or not, there are some exorcists out there, and these are the more wayward ones, who will say that no, they can't lie whenever they're under compulsion, which is nonsense. Because again, yes, they can, and they do. And number two, I'll also say, well, if that's the case, if they have to obey the command of the exorcist under compulsion, so they can't lie because they're being compelled by the name of Jesus, well, they would also be immediately cast out because the priest is also telling them in the name of Jesus to be cast out, and yet they resist that, don't they? And so they're also obviously going to resist the command to tell the truth and to not lie. So this is dangerous stuff whenever you come across this. As again, some very well-known exorcists say, stay away from those exorcists who are telling you stuff like, you know, Latin is more superior in an exorcism, and telling you information that they received from demons during exorcism. Stay away from those guys. They're bad news, and they got a lot of problems with them. Anyways, hope y'all enjoy this. Gonna do another one here tomorrow, so stay tuned for more. Got more shows coming up. Hope y'all enjoyed this one. Of course, everybody hit that like button, hit the subscribe button. And of course, let me know what you think about this. If you agree, if you disagree. Having watched that video, do you think that this was something natural in origin, supernatural in origin? Do you think that these are conversations that are productive for the public sphere or not? I'd like to hear from y'all. Don't forget, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, and also check me out at patreon.com/reason and theology if you want to get access to extra content and support what I'm doing here so we can continue to produce this show. And by the way, I did just post new patron-only content earlier today, so go and check it out. All right, see y'all tomorrow. God bless.